Welcome to today's episode of Wealthy Living Conversations. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wealthy Living. As an integrated life, clarity and wellbeing coach and a professional conversation facilitator, it is here that I connect with a variety of wonderful humans to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. Today, we're going to talk about digital technology and how it's changed the landscape of parenting dramatically in recent years. Parents now have to prep their kids to be safe and successful, both online and in the online and in the offline worlds. And the truth is, no matter how tech savvy you may be, not much has prepared parents for the challenges that come with the online space. And with the current global pandemic, living, learning and working from home is changing how we use technology, presenting even further challenges. Despite media and many parents often highlighting the fear, overwhelm and anxiety about navigating this space for kids, digital technology also has its benefits, and it can contribute to the confidence, resilience, and empowerment of your kids. Which brings me to introduce my guest today, Martine Oglethorpe, founder of Modern Parent and author of her new book, The Modern Parent: Raising a Great Kid in the Digital World. So welcome, Martine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So Martine is a mother to 5 boys and a daughter no longer with us. 10 years ago, after combining a teaching background with a master's in counselling, she began working with kids and teenagers who were struggling with their well-being and family relationships. While the problems those kids were presenting were varied, she saw a common theme starting to emerge. She says, there seemed to be a huge divide between how parents and kids understood the digital world. Parents were frustrated by their children's seeming reliance on digital devices, and young people were frustrated that parents' answer to any perceived problems was simply curb or control their use of digital devices. It became clear to her that in order for families to work together and live in harmony, parents needed to gain a greater perspective and understanding of the workings of the digital world their kids were playing in. Martine wants parents and families to experience joy and connection within their families, and today we're going to discuss some of the challenges, the benefits and the tools to help you with this, especially during a time when we're spending so much more time than usual in our homes. So, Martine, I think maybe we can first start to address some of the challenge and the benefits of kids living, working and learning from home. So what are you seeing at the moment? I'm sure so many parents have come to you at this time and asked for your advice or, just gaining perspective on what do we do when we're all in this one space together and we're all working and living and trying to sort of navigate this space. So what are the biggest challenges that you're seeing people facing at the moment?
Yeah, well, there's certainly lots of challenges faced by both the parents and the children as well. Obviously, there is an increased use of screens and technology because children are using them for their work, they're using them for their education, so they've got to be online and doing a lot of their work on screens, much more than they usually would. And then obviously parents are trying to do that as well as they're trying to work, and so they've had to also go to some remote work, so they're online and on screens as well. But also for our kids, not only are they doing their work online, but then all of their downtime, a lot of that is being spent online because all of the things that they used to do in their spare time have been taken away from them. So, in terms of, just hanging out and having some entertainment, a lot of that is going to the screens because they're playing their games and or they're watching their YouTube or their Netflix or those sorts of things as their downtime. But they're also turning to those devices to connect with their friends. So we know that, connections is crucial for young people, and particularly at this stage where all of those have been taken away. So they can no longer just hang out with their mates or sit next to their mate at school and all those sorts of things. So that has been taken away. So the technology now has replaced a lot of that. So we are either chatting on social media, or they're on video chats, or they're playing a game because that game allows them to talk to their mates online. So there's a whole range of reasons why kids are getting online, and it means then that a lot of their day is spent on the screens. And obviously we know anything that we do too much of, can not be so great for us. But it's certainly just a sign of this time that this has replaced a lot of those things.
Yeah. So how then do we manage the screen time effectively so that we're not basically, so we're coming from a compassionate understanding as parents that they're using these to replace some of the social connection and fill their leisure time because maybe sporting things aren't happening or their other extracurricular activities aren't happening. They're not seeing people at school. So coming from a compassionate angle as a parent and really understanding their need, I suppose, in why they're doing that, but also knowing that, like you said, too much of one thing can cause issues, and parents are seeing problems in the irritability I've heard from other parents, including my own children sometimes, or often a lot of the battles between parents is trying to get them away from them, because we all know that a lot of these games and a lot of these social media and even YouTube are set up to keep them on. And so how do we manage the screen time effectively when we, balancing the compassion and the well-being?
Yeah, well, I think we have to understand that, firstly, the kids are playing with these devices that we handed them. And at this time, we've also almost forced them to use them. So we've gone from seeing these devices as something that we were always trying to control and manage and curb and all of those things. So they kind of always had a bit of a negative connotation in terms of parenting. It was something that we knew they liked. We all let them do it. Sometimes it made life easier for us, but we always wanted to to maintain some of that control. And then all of a sudden we've put it back in their hands and their laps and said, now you have to use it. You have to use it all morning for your school. And then also we don't really have a lot of other options for you at the moment. Now, of course, there's many other things that they can do to fill in their time. But for a child, these devices do answer a lot of their perceived needs. So they are educating them, informing them, entertaining them, socializing them and connecting them. So for a child, they answer a lot of their needs. Now, of course, we know they have many more needs that the devices can't answer. But we have to, I guess, look at it from that perspective, in that this is a portable little thing in their hand, and it can do a whole lot of stuff for them. So I think as parents, we do need to work a little bit harder to try and provide those other things to do, those other ways to get connected, which I know is hard at the moment, although hopefully getting a bit easier now. Those other ways to be entertained. And that sometimes just requires a bit of our input. It means we do have to, get in there and say, okay, it's time for us to all go out for a family walk, or we're going to shoot some hoops or kick the ball, or all those sorts of things, and building those times into our day so that they get to know too that there's a whole range of other experiences that they need. And I think if we're doing that, the earlier we're doing that, the more these sorts of experiences become part of their day. But I think also with this time, it's really important that we're talking to our kids a lot about the situation at the moment. We're talking to our kids about the fact that, yes, I know we are using our screens a lot at the moment. But this is not, normal times. And we will go back to times when they can have their sport and their training and hanging out with their mates. And we just need to make it clear that those things need to be a priority. And that, again, I'm not saying you have to go cold turkey and take away a device the minute school goes back, because everything's going to be returning slowly. So we want to sort of return some of our rules a bit slowly as well, I think. So I think it's important that we just keep talking to them about the situation as well, and talk to them about, well, what are the things that the technology was able to replace? What are the things that, that it did well at, and what are the things that it didn't do so well at? And really letting kids know that it has a role, but it can't play the role of everything. So I know for my own kids and many other kids, that what they are looking forward to getting back to about going to school is hanging out with their mates and getting back to their sports training and playing competitive sport and all those sorts of things. So I think this is a perfect time for us to have those conversations about, well, the technology is pretty good and it fills some of a void, but it's never going to fill all the voids that we need. It's never going to be everything that we need as human beings. So I think this is a good time to remind our kids of why we have to have some boundaries around it, and why it can't be something that is the only place where we are entertained or informed or connected. And so I do hope that, at this time, our kids will go back and they will realize that, nothing can replace that face-to-face connection. And, I know we've all had our Zoom parties where we've connected with friends, and it's great, and it's a good way to connect and see our friends, but it's still nothing on what it's like to be hanging out on our friends' dining room table and having a coffee or a glass of wine. It just doesn't cut it. So, and the same for our kids. I know my son is on a few different apps with his mates, and a fitness one that, they're tracking their running and all those sorts of things. So they have lots of banter, but there is no way he would rather do that than be at footy training with his mates, running next to them, bit of locker room banter, all of that sort of stuff. So I think we can use this time to remind our kids that there are some really important things that we need in life, and those connections are really important. So we have to do the things we need to do to maintain that, but also, getting out, getting that fresh air, having that physical activity. These are all things that we really do need, and these are things that the technology can't replace. So I am hopeful, I guess, that we can use this time to keep talking to kids just about the role that the technology plays, the role that it's played, in the last 6 to 8 weeks, and the role that, it will play going forward. So what are some of those things that worked well? What are some of the habits that you formed that maybe you need to change? Or what are some good habits that maybe you might be have acquired that we can keep going? So I think it's just a good chance to just really have a look at how you've been spending your time and how you want to spend your time, and how they want to spend their time. So ask them, what are the things going forward that are going to be important to you? And how are you going to manage your time on the screens to make sure those things remain important?
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because I mean, I'm a big advocate for reflection and real self-awareness. And I think that these sort of times give us, not just for the kids and technology, but all of us in so many different ways. It's really giving the opportunity to really be able to pause and reflect on, what are we actually missing? What aren't we missing? And what will we do once we go back to, kind of normal, or whatever normal becomes? And I think that that's really, really good advice. And it also then creates another avenue, I suppose, to have those communication, like those real quality connection with your children, where you can sit down and maybe write lists of values, or now readdress how do we want our family unit to move going forward? Like, what has this shown you? Kind of like you have to feel happiness to know sadness, and sadness to know happiness, and all those things. So now they've seen it, been forced to feel it a different way. How will they, what parts did they like and didn't they like?
Yeah. And I think even having that conversation about, there was a lot that was taken away from our kids at this time. They've missed out on hanging out with their mates. They've missed out on a lot of parties. They've missed out on playing, their competitive sport. They've missed out on maybe, ceremonies or rituals that might have been happening now, and all sorts of things. They've missed out on holidays and camping trips. So there's a lot that our kids have missed out on. And I think that's, for the most part, most kids that I've seen have coped really well. And I think, we want to also be talking to them about that as well, that, this is something that, we all had to endure, but look at all of the successes we've had, and look at the way that, we've overcome this stuff. Now, that's not to say that everyone's had an easy time of it. And I know some people have having a terrible time of it, but we are still every day overcoming little obstacles or big obstacles, or having those little wins. So I think, talking to our kids about this as well, that, in the future, there are going to be other obstacles and challenges in our life. And let's, again, use this as a time to say we missed out on a lot of stuff here, but we survived and we did other things and we adapted. And then we were able to reflect on it and look at, what can we do again next time, and all those sorts of things. So, and, I completely understand that there's been so many challenges, and a lot of kids are struggling. There's no doubt about that. But I think, if we're talking to our kids and talking about, well, look at the little wins, whatever it is, let's look at how we've overcome some of these things and how we've managed to adapt.
Yeah. So, I mean, really getting, I suppose, those conversations on resilience, which is, and the teachings of resilience. So there's definitely those positives around it. Now, when we talk about the kids, like, I know that speaking to other mothers and being a mother myself and, just reading different things, I know that there are a lot of mothers that are struggling with their kids, possibly almost, I mean, we are all victims of this situation, right? That's what we are. I mean, we've got to deal with the situation at hand. And some are going to play to the victimhood and some are not. So for the ones that more play to that victimhood, in that, saying the stuff that's true, like, I'm not getting to see my friends, I'm not getting to play my friends, that's why I have to be on this, that's why, and they're using those things as, I suppose, their excuse. Not that their excuses aren't true, but they're playing those excuses up and not actually listening to the boundaries and respect from their parents. What are your suggestions in managing that? Because I know that I've got a lot of girlfriends who are dealing with that with young teenage sons.
Look, I think it's important that we don't say, well, you can have, carte blanche for however long you want to have a screen for, you go ahead and have it 24 hours a day. We still need to have some of our family rules and boundaries around these things. And obviously it's just been harder now because they don't have so many other things to go to, and all those excuses that they will make. So again, it's about, and I always say, don't have these conversations with a child while they're in the middle of playing a game or they're in the middle of watching their favorite show or something. If you start saying, get off the screens, you've been on it too long, that's when people get they get defensive and they'll throw all those excuses at you because they don't want it to be ripped away from them, because they are probably engrossed in something or in the middle of something. So always try and say, have these conversations away from the screens. And it's talking about, if you think that they are spending too much time on a screen and not and other areas are missing out, then have the conversation away from the screen and have it about focusing on the things that they're missing out on. Not so much that you want to take all their fun away, and I know that you're not getting to hang out with your mates and all of that, but that doesn't mean you have to be talking to your mates 24/7, because you wouldn't be anyway in a normal day. So it's about still trying to put some boundaries around it. Obviously this is a lot easier for younger kids, because I can turn around to my 8-year-old and say, okay, you've got an hour to play on your game and chat with your mate, and then we need to do something else. Now, I understand obviously that gets harder with older kids, but again, it's also just trying to explain to them about their other needs that they need. And if they've been on a screen all day for schoolwork, for example, my 16-year-old is on it from 9 till 3 with a couple of little breaks in between, but that's a long time to be on a screen. And then, he does want to have a chat with his mates or play a game and those sorts of things. But then it's about having conversations like, okay, mate, you need to go outside. You need to go for a run. You need to get fresh air. And it's trying to word it around the other needs that you need to be met. And it's not that I'm trying to take away your fun, but I know, and really how important it is that you have a whole lot of other experiences in your day. And so that's why I'm going to put some boundaries around it, maybe, and ask them what they think. At the end of the day, most kids will turn around and say, well, I know it's not right for me to be on 10, 12 hours straight. I know that's not good for me. But try and get them to come up with that and say, how do you feel? You've been on all day. You're probably going to get a bit headachy. It's not going to be good for your posture. It's not good for, your headspace. But also, speak to them about some of the other things. What else do you want to fit into a normal day? What are some other things that you know that you need to do? And try and make it so that it's not so much I'm setting all these rules just because, but there are reasons for these rules. And you don't have to go into the long-winded explanations. It's just, you need to have this time. So I'm going to say let's cut it off at whatever time or after whatever time, but also try and get them to come up with something if you can. Like, not all kids are going to be receptive to that. Some will just say, well, I'll have it all night, thanks. But others might be able to just say, yeah, probably, an hour and a half of gaming is okay for me at night, and then, let's do something else. So it's just trying to remind them all the time of those reasons why we want to curb some of that screen time, I guess. And then I guess having other things for them to go on to, say to them, we're going to go for, I don't know, a walk at night after dinner, depending on where you live. Or, we might be playing a board game, or we might be putting a movie on that everyone likes, or have a movie night. And just try to have those things that they can transition to, because once they do those things, they do enjoy them. It's just sometimes hard to pull them off and get them there in the first place. So if you can build these sorts of things into your day or your week, it kind of makes it a bit easier.
Yeah. Awesome. So, the other challenge that I see happening a lot is multitasking with a number of devices. So they've got the computer that they might be doing their online learning with. They've got the iPad that they're chatting with their friends at the same time as, and they might even have their phone sitting there where they're, doing texting chats. I don't know, but, and they might even be doing that when they're gaming, and then they've got their chat next to it, and I'm just seeing a lot of multitasking with devices. Is that a bad thing, or is that okay, or what's your take on that?
Well, I guess it depends on what you're trying to achieve in that time that you're multitasking. What are the tasks that you need to achieve? If you need to achieve something, like what we call that deep work or important work or homework, or listening to a teacher, or listening to a lecture, or writing an essay, or then you can't multitask. If you want to, stir the cheese sauce and have a chat with your child, and scroll through Instagram, you might be able to do that. But it's looking at what are you trying to achieve in that time, because we know that the brain only has a finite amount of attention it can give any one thing at a time. And when I explain it to kids, I explain it as, imagine your brain attention is like a pie, and if you go and check your Snapchat while you're trying to study for your maths test, then a slice of that pie is taken away to go and check that Snapchat, and you're left with not as big a brain capacity to work on the maths. And it takes a long time for that bit of pie to come back, because it's gone somewhere else. You've got to come back. So there's time in between all that. There's time that you're not doing, the focus work as well as you can. And so everything just takes longer. And so I guess I try to explain, and I had to do this to my own son, because I walked in on him once, and he was, studying for a maths test. He was downloading some songs on SoundCloud, and he had his Snapchat open, and said, you can't do all of these things at once. And he said, oh, you always tell me you can multitask. And I said, yes, but I can't when I'm trying to do that deep concentrated work. And so I did, went and did the research, and I had to produce it to him that we cannot actually multitask in terms of doing one job really effectively. So I guess in a way to explain it to kids, because sometimes they don't really care about how effectively they're doing something. No. So for me, I try and say, if you want to get something done quicker, then, try and devote that, start off with 20 minutes, make it 40-minute blocks to do something. Just focus on that, and try not to have all of the other devices on and the other distractions, because you will find that everything will take you longer, and you'll be sitting here doing all of this for a lot longer, where you could just get the task done, then go and enjoy the time on your device, or scrolling through your Instagram, or chatting to your mates. And it's a really hard thing. And look, a lot of adults struggle with this as well. But the devices do offer a lot of distraction. There's no doubt about that. So even, some practical things I try and get kids to do is to, turn off the notifications while they are doing that homework or that study time. Because when we hear those bings and those dings, or see those red letters come up on our phone, even if we don't respond, again, that has taken part of our brain concentration away and gone to that notification, and is saying to ourselves, wonder what that is, wonder who it is, or wonder what they're saying, or wonder if I'm missing out. Should I answer it now? Should I answer it later? And all of that that brain power has gone to there, and again, it's not on task. So again, it's just that distraction which takes you away from what you're doing, and again makes it harder for you to get back on task. So trying to turn those notifications off. And if it's a phone that you generally don't need a phone when you're doing study, try and put that away, out of mind, out of sight. And try and leave those times that you need to do concentrated work for that time. And again, this is really hard. If you've got a kid who has no interest in their schoolwork, then that's really, really tricky. But I guess trying to frame it in a way that if you just get it done, get it over and done with quickly, then you will have that time to go on and do things after. So again, always trying to flip it back to what's in it for them, which might be, get it done quickly and you can go on and play a game for longer.
So in hearing you all of those suggestions, they come down a lot to you, a parent explaining to the kids what the benefit of doing it, like just staying focused is, as well as explaining what happens with the brain when you are multitasking. What about that extra step forward in actually taking devices away from a child and not letting them self-regulate once they have the information? What's your take on that?
Well, it depends on how you're taking them away, how long you're taking them away, what are they doing that needs to be taken away from. So again, it's a conversation that you could have, and it might be, I can see that you're not coping with this, so let's try it by me taking it away and just see how you go, and let's see what you can achieve. And again, some kids are going to be a lot more compliant to this than others, but this is just normal parenting stuff. Some kids are good at following rules and listening to what you say, and others not so good. So again, it's going to come down to your individual child and working out what tactic's going to work for them. Now, for my younger kids, I can certainly take something away from them because I know they don't have the brain development to be able to know exactly what is good for them right now, and they are not able to regulate those behaviors. So what I want to do though is to I do want to teach them to be able to do it themselves as they get older, but I also need to be able to teach them that I might have to take it away at the start to get them to understand that this is something that they can't manage on their own all the time. So that's why I will say to my 8-year-old, it's time to get off the game now. You need to do something else. And thankfully we've had these rules in place for a long time, so he knows that once he's had a fair go, and he gets a fair go, he does get a fair go on it, particularly now. So it is just a matter of saying, you've had a good go, we need to do something else. And, most of the time that will happen because that's sort of always been something that has happened. But he also knows that if he does do the right thing, he will get it again tomorrow. So it's just trying to, it's like all of those normal parenting decisions you have. It's like trying to give them good food. You've got to have good food before you get the treats, all those sorts of things. So it's just trying to work out what works for that individual child. So it's hard to take something off an older kid. It's very hard to walk into your 16-year-old bedroom and take his phone away and all those sorts of things. You're probably going to end up with a lot more conflict than you are managing this. So by 16, a lot of those habits are pretty ingrained, so we probably want to try and get onto it before that, because again then you are just going to be relying on having a conversation with them and then trying to get them to make their own decisions as best they can, because once we start taking them away every time they do something, there is going to be some resentment built up. And particularly at this time, we know that using it as punishment is usually not so effective, and it does build up that resentment.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about that for a little bit, because I have read stuff that you've written about that, and your perspective, from what I understand when I've read, is that taking away devices as a form of punishment, which is something that I've done, which is something that a lot of parents do, because it's something that they really want. And if they're speaking disrespectfully or they're not listening, then, a lot of the go-to consequence is to just take it away from them, and that they lose that privilege. But you've written in stuff to say that you don't necessarily think that that's a great form of punishment. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
No, I guess firstly, I don't think that punishment really is something that we really want to be doing to our kids. You know,
Or
to punish
discipline?
means really, yeah. So to punish them is, but that is really what happens when we take away a device. We are, in a sense, punishing them because, and which means we're hurting them. We want to do something that we know will hurt them, so they won't do that behavior again. Now, you know, studies show us that that's not really an effective form of teaching because in the short term it can certainly work, and I know there'll be people listening that will say, well, every time I take my device away from my child, you know, it fixes it because they know that they don't want to do that next time. And sure, in the short term I think it can work, and I think it can work with younger kids, but I also don't think that there's huge long-term benefits of that, because we are not teaching them about, you know, why we want that behavior to be the way it is, and it does come down to some respect in that. And I guess I don't really think that we get all of the respect in the world by punishing our kids or doing things that are hurting them. So I guess, and I know it sounds a bit wishy-washy sometimes, and sometimes, you know, in the heat of the moment it is easier to just grab that device and put it away. And I have certainly still done that. When my kids are fighting over a device, I will just grab it and take it away and put it on top of the fridge. And yes, it diffuses that situation at that point, because I want that diffused and I don't want that fighting anymore. And they can't work it out themselves. So it comes away, and then they can go and think about that. So I'm not saying that we don't ever do it, but I don't want it to be the go-to every time I have a problem with the technology, that I just take it away, because I do want to be able to explain to them that you know, I know you want it right now, or I know you want to do it, but you know, we need to do other stuff now, and we need to, you know, trying to get them to be in charge of their own behaviors as well, because I want them, as they get older, to be able to make those decisions, because we know how hard it is to put a device down ourselves as an adult. And I want them to be able to do that, because I'm not going to be there standing next to them every day when they get older, or even when they're 16 or 17 or 18. So I do want them to be able to work out how they manage their time, what's important to them. I want them to be able to prioritize things, and I want them to understand how things affect them. So I will be talking to my kids about, well, I know that you want to keep playing this, but you know, can you see that it's now making you tired and grumpy and irritable? And can you see that you're not coping because you're not winning anymore, because you're getting tired? And so it's trying to get them to, I guess, spot the effects on themselves as well. And so that, you know, and this is something again that I think a lot of adults aren't very good at, because we didn't have this when we were growing up. And so now we have these devices that, you know, we don't always know that this is not healthy for me to scroll through these Instagram pages and look at all these amazing things. And I know it's getting me down, and I'm comparing myself to everyone else, or I'm feeling excluded, and all of those things, that those negative experiences we feel on a device, you know, we've never had to, you know, pull ourselves away or try and understand what's good for us. So I guess these are the things that I want, and I think our kids are probably going to be pretty good at, and maybe even better than a lot of the adults around, because
Yeah.
we are trying to educate them in what it means to be on a device, and all of the experiences that they'll have.
Yeah, and that's really good. And that also brings me to the next part that I wanted to talk to you about. Gosh, you keep leading into all these next things, which I want to talk about. So it's perfect. It's like we planned it all.
Good.
Is role modeling. Because I think that especially at this time, with everyone being at home, they're seeing more of us than they ever do. They're seeing our day-to-day habits more than they ever would. I mean, I work at home generally anyway, but now when they're working in the space, they're seeing what I do all day. And obviously with them home, it's not exactly the same as what I would be doing all day. I certainly wouldn't be spending that much time in the kitchen. But yeah, you know, they are looking at us, and we become role models even more when they are in our, you know, in our space the whole time. So how important is this role modeling piece for teaching them?
No, I think it's crucial. I think it's one of the most crucial things in our teaching, because, you know, we can still, you know, talk to our kids till we're blue in the face, and they don't always listen to everything, but they are seeing everything that we're doing and experiencing it. And, you know, just as an example, when I talk to young students, and we talk about the need for, you know, a whole range of experiences in their life, and this is why mum or dad might nag at you to get off your phones or whatever, because there's a lot of things we need to fit into our day. And every time I have this conversation, usually like at a primary school level, there'll always be children that come up to me at the end or put their hand up and say things like, oh, I know you said about, not bringing devices to the dinner table, or putting a device away when someone's talking to you. You said, but my mum's the worst, or my dad's the worst. They always answering their emails at the dinner table, or I can't get their attention because they've always got their head in their phone, and yet they're always telling me off. So I think, it proves to me, and that honestly happens every time that I would do a talk. So I think it's really important that we look, and that's not to say that we're not going to use our devices and we have to put them away every time our kids are within eyesight, because that's obviously not practical, particularly now. But I think it's important just to be conscious of the role that the technology is playing in our lives, the roles that the devices are playing in our lives, so that they get to see, well, yes, mum uses this for work a lot, and when she's using it for work, she's focused on that, and we might have to do something else, and that's okay. But when we're having some downtime, or we're playing a game, I don't want to be playing a game with them and scrolling my phone, because that's not what I want them to be doing. When we're at the dinner table, we have a rule: no devices come to the dinner table, because I don't want them to go to somebody's house for dinner and pull out a phone, or go out for dinner with their mates and all be on their phones. So I think it's trying to build all of those times in where we don't have the devices, so our kids get used to seeing that there are times when it's not appropriate, but also on how we're using it. And just because our phone rings, do we have to answer it if we're in the middle of a game or something, or can I just leave that for the minute and have a look later? And so I think it's all of those things that our kids notice, but they will also notice how we behave online. And there are lots of if you spend any time on parenting blogs, or even on major media, newspaper, Facebook pages, you only have to look at some of the comment sections to see how people behave online, the comments that they make. And a lot of these are parents, obviously, because if they're on parenting blogs or they're talking about something that's a parenting issue, the way that they can talk to other people is quite hideous and horrific, and can get really abusive and judgmental. And so, kids are seeing that as well, and they see how adults behave online. So I think, we obviously want to be making sure that we're doing all those things right as well, and that we're not giving away too much information, and we're not oversharing things and all those things that we don't want them to do. Then, we have to be careful that we're not doing them as well, because they certainly will be watching and taking all those cues from us. So really important that, and we can use this time to try and, I know we're all on it a lot more, but I still think that we can use this time to make sure that when we are connecting with our friends or family, particularly this time, that we're making sure that we are focused on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So many good points there. And I think that if I summed up that little bit about, this time when we're all living and working and being at home, some of the challenges that we talked about, and managing the screens effectively, but also being, I suppose, a little bit understanding and lenient and compassionate that they're not really having that time with their friends. So that's filling that need as well, but also just having lots and lots of conversations about reflection and what's working and what's not, and how they want to see themselves navigating going forward, and maybe even putting some rules in place now that they, together with their parents or together with us, can come up with going forward. We talked about multitasking, that being the challenge, and the good and the bad with that, and ways how to manage that, and then us being able to role model. Are there any other big benefits with, I suppose, there's some of the challenges, and we talked about how to work through some of those challenges, but what are the biggest benefits about having technology at this time?
Well, I think obviously the biggest benefits, aside from, also being able to still work and learn and all those sorts of things, I think at this time we can see that, I would hope that parents are using this time to maybe pay some attention to the sorts of things that their kids are doing. Even if it's, learning to play one of their games with them. Now, obviously, they're not going to want you to play with them every time, and you're not going to want to play every time. But maybe getting your child to teach you how to play a round of Fortnite, if that's what they're on, or Minecraft, or whatever it is. And that can be not only a good way to bond with your child, but it also lets them see that you have an interest in what they're doing. But it also allows you to make boundaries around something that you have some understanding about too. Because I know, if we try and, say, oh, get off that game, it's a stupid game, it does get their back up, because they're probably thinking, well, I actually love it. You've no idea about it. Maybe if you had a look, you might see what I like about it, and we can at least have a conversation about it. So I think, use this time to maybe find out a little bit about what they're doing. Use this time to find out, how their mates are going online on social media. We can, kids aren't always going to be forthcoming with everything about how they feel right now, but sometimes we can talk to them. And I've done this with my kids. So how are your mates going? Have you noticed anything on social media that they're not coping, or that they're doing well, or what do you think they're looking forward to? So I think it can be a good way to have those conversations with your kids, to feel about the sorts of things that go on social media, and also the sorts of things that are going on with their mates, and then therefore with themselves as well sometimes. So I think we can use this time to just be a bit more engaged with them, and even just teach them a few skills as well. If we're researching a project with them, or these are the times that we can maybe think, well, so we're looking up whatever it is we're looking up, whether it's green tree frogs or whatever. What is this information telling me? Who wrote this information? Where did they get it from? Have they done their research? Who's opposing this viewpoint? Is it a viewpoint? Is it an advertisement? All of those things are, those critical thinking skills are going to be really important for kids, as they go on. We want them to be able to recognize when something's an advertisement, or when something's someone's opinion, or when something is an opinion but with nothing to back it up. We want them to be able to critically evaluate all of that content they consume. When they're watching a TikTok video, is that going to be safe if they do it? All those sorts of things. So these are the times when we can, take a bit more of an interest, I guess. And I know we're all super busy, and we don't want to sit next to our kids every minute looking at what they're doing online, but we can, tap into a little bit, I think, to what sort of things they're doing, and use this time to connect around what they're doing, and try and lead into some of those conversations.
And maybe even make a TikTok video with them.
Maybe there's plenty that are doing that, and that's a good fun thing that you can do with your kids. And it's again, any time that you're connecting or bonding with your child, and if you're doing it at a platform that they love and enjoy, they will also enjoy teaching you about it as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key in there, isn't it? That connection piece. And this does give us a lot of extra time, not necessarily that we're, like you said, that we're quite busy, but it really gives us an added opportunity to really get an eye into some of the things that they're looking at and talking about. And I mean, most of this is done, a lot of it in the school time, so we don't really know what they're learning each subject, and what their tasks are, and what they're struggling with or not struggling with. We don't have an eye into that as much unless we make the big effort to do so. And it really does give us this opportunity in this short-lived time to really connect further into what are they doing, and how they're going, and both on mental health as well as what they're really enjoying and why they're enjoying it, and really enable more quality time together. So a lot of and more communication and more connection. So I think in a way they're awesome benefits.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I guess that's what I've always been saying in terms of technology. We must focus on the communication, and we must focus on the connection with our kids. And I think, I think this has been a time that can really, really help us with that. When we, we do have not necessarily, hours and hours of time, but we are with them the whole time, and we are seeing them from a different perspective, because we're seeing them, in doing all sorts of different activities than we usually would.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, when it comes down to what I'm thinking now, is that a conversation that I had recording another episode with George Cowell, and we were talking about authentic marketing, I suppose, or more talking about sustainability and compassion at this time with business, and how to pivot your businesses. And we talked about meeting people where they're at. And I suppose that's relevant in this situation as well, and in just generally in life, is, meet them where they're at. And if we can meet, ultimately we all just want to really connect with our kids a lot. And a lot of the time when parents get upset about them not listening, or all that stuff, that we feel like disconnected from them. And suppose it gives us this opportunity to really look at where they are at, and be able to then meet them where they're at. And if where they're at is on a lot of the things to do with devices, then if we can make the effort to try to meet them in that place, and see, and try to enjoy that space with them a little bit, then it can obviously be beneficial for the relationship.
Yeah, definitely. And it also allowed them to have a bit of give and take. You've spent a bit of time where they're at, they might spend a bit of time where you're at, which,
Yeah, perfect.
might be encouraging them to do something else. So, I think there's some really good opportunities for us now to, do what we can to really enhance those connections.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So the other benefits just generally with digital space, like when I was going through your wonderful book that you've just written, and there were a few things that you talked about, like you've got a whole section on benefits of digital devices and or using technology. And some of the things that I saw that I really do love, which people might not otherwise, which I wouldn't have otherwise thought of either when I thought of digital devices, but I would think of things that I really want to do help people with as a coach myself. And that is the chance to be seen and heard and creativity. They were two things where I sort of go, I would almost think that you need to do in-person stuff for that, but you talked about those two things in a way that was like, oh wow, that is a real benefit. So can we briefly talk about
Yeah.
the idea of digital technology providing a platform to be seen and heard, and who benefits from that the most?
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, look, not every child is going to be, the child that gets up in front of the assembly and talks, or is happy to do that, or is going to be someone who, is a leader in the school, or all those sorts of things. That, there's lots of people who don't necessarily, come across as having a lot to say, when in fact everybody's got a lot to say. Everybody's got a voice, and I think, I have seen in many ways that digital platforms can allow those sorts of things to happen. I think I give an example where there's a couple of little girls, shy little girls, but really passionate about the effect of the bushfires on the koalas, and so they started up a GoFundMe page, with the help of their parents, and they were putting up all their artwork on koalas and getting people to donate and to talk about it. And for these girls, the buzz of feeling heard was huge, that people are listening to them, and adults were listening to them, and a whole range of people. And I think, it also gives them the opportunity to think there's some really positive things that I can do, and I can actually make a difference to the world, big or small, but I actually have a platform to do that, whereas, in my day, we're a lot more limited in the sorts of things that we could change about the world around us. And so it certainly gives them the opportunity to have that voice. And even just, I used to say, when I was doing a lot of blogging, I used to go to blogging conferences, and there were bloggers there who had these massive voices online. They had these amazing blogs, and their written word was fantastic. And then when you saw them, they were these really, shy, introvert people. You think, wow, I would never have guessed that's who you were. So I think it sort of gives us that ability to be who we are, as well. And as I say, there's lots of, TikToks where people are actually, they're having a voice as well. They're not all just, being silly. Some of them are actually, having messages and things like that. Not all of them good, but, it still can certainly give people a voice. So
Yeah.
I certainly think that can be a way to do that.
And that's great. And even in the idea of just being silly, like doing a TikTok video that is silly, or just a dance, a lot of those people would never get up, in an assembly at school, or, at a class
Yeah.
volunteer to go into the school performance or anything like that, but behind a screen in their safe little house or their environment, even though it goes probably more public than, or widespread than they would if they were just in the school music hall, they feel more confident in doing it. So it gives them that ability, I suppose, for those more introverted people to have a platform to be seen and to be heard. And even in comments and writing, and in texting group, there's so many of them now do this group texting conversations where they actually get to write that line instead of being sort of in person when they're all in the circle and they're just the listener. They don't get to actually say much because they don't know when to interrupt or say something.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, it can be intimidating for people to be in a circle of friends, or colleagues, or peers, or whatever, and to have your point of view. You might not feel confident, but we certainly can if we have different means to get it across. So I do see that as one of the benefits.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's creativity as well, you know, is another one that I said. And obviously there's the things that come to mind of the art apps, and, you know, doing creativity like that through an app, but also just even coming up with the GoFundMe page and ways to show, you know, the artwork like you just described. It's really putting a creative way of getting yourself out there and actually being creative. And look, I still, I'm a big lover of a pen and paper. I still do a lot of journaling and drawing and all of those things myself, or crafting, and I don't think that this replaces that, but it's just another vehicle to do it, rather than the less I suppose it's very easy for me, who loves the in-person connection, who loves the writing and the drawing, to see it as superior to doing things digitally. But the truth is that not one is more superior than another. They're just different. And they're
I think that they are different, and it's the same with, you know, we see some kids make some amazing videos and edit photos in amazing ways, but even just playing your Minecraft, I mean, there's some real creativity that can go on with that. You know, if you've ever had a child that likes Minecraft or things like that, I mean, some of the buildings they can build, and the houses or the stadiums or the cities, or it's quite unbelievable. And you know, you spend a bit of time watching, and you think, wow, how did they come up with that? And it's imagination, and it's creativity, and it's building, and it's thinking outside the square, and it's coming up with new and innovative ways to do things, or new things to use to build something. You know, there's a whole range of creativity that does happen. It's not to say, again, that it replaces our, you know, our paints and our pens and our building blocks and all those things that are still really important. It's just another avenue. And I think I also mention it usually is because I guess most people see the digital devices as stifling creativity. They've no longer got imagination. They're, you know, dumbing them down. They're becoming zombies and all those sorts of things. Whereas I think it's important to know that like everything, there is good and bad, and there is certainly an element of technology that can do all those things, and can, you know, stifle their creativity and all that, depending on what they're doing. But if they're using it in really productive ways and creative ways, then there are some great things they can do. So for parents, these are the things I want them to encourage. I want them to, you know, look at the things that they're doing and making and creating and sharing, and encourage those more positive and productive uses. You know, they're always going to consume content. They're always just going to watch something else, or they're always just going to watch Netflix or YouTube videos, and that's okay for a bit. But, you know, I think, you know, encouraging those other ways that we can really use it to you know, come up with something and create something can certainly be beneficial.
Absolutely. So if we, you know, we all want to raise our kids to be, you know, great and take advantage of some of these opportunities, say, that the digital world presents, because it's not going away. So, you know, but we need to teach them some skills and thinking and behaviours so that they can face some of the challenges that come up. But I think a lot of parents struggle how to teach them those things. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was about critical thinking. And for me, that's been really, really highlighted at this point in time, not necessarily just for kids, but it's been highlighted for us. Like, all I see amongst, you know, I even wrote a post myself the other day because I was a little bit frustrated about how many people are just so quick to share a whole lot of stuff and then spread a whole lot of, let's call it, fake news or whatever it is, without really having the ability to think critically and be able to look at information and look at the references and who said it, and, you know, just different ways to actually look at it critically to know whether possibly that is real or that is truth or that is fake, etc. And that's obviously a skill that's really important for our kids to know, to have that discernment and that ability to critically think. So how do we teach some of that to our kids?
Yeah, look, I think this is probably going to be one of the most crucial skills that our kids and even us will need going forward, because there is so much content being created by the second. Yeah. And you put something on YouTube, there is no one there to tell you that is safe, that is relevant, that is helpful, that is true. You put up a meme, you can add some statistics, you can write an article. you can do whatever you like, and you can put it out there as the truth, or as relevant to you, or as, you know, helpful to everyone else, when in fact it may be the complete opposite. So I think it is really one of the most crucial skills we are going to need to all learn, is how do we know what is going to be real and what is fake, but also how do we determine what is good for me. You know, is what I'm reading, listening to ourselves as well, is this something that is doing me good? Is this something that is, you know, motivating and uplifting and inspiring me? Or is this something that is really getting me down and frustrating me? And you know, and that's not to say we're going to believe everything or agree with everything that we watch, but we want to start listening to what is the effect it's having on me, and do I need to change what I'm listening to? Do I need to curate my feeds a little bit better so that I'm not just looking at all these people that are making me frustrated at the moment? Or am I in fact maybe just listening to the same point of view over and over again because I've curated my feeds so like me that I'm not hearing any other voices? And that can be dangerous as well, because we're not hearing opposing views and things like that. So it's I guess in terms of trying to teach our kids, what I'm trying to do in schools is to try and get kids to try and have a balanced view of where they're getting information from, but then also to look at that information that's coming in. Obviously, we want them to get news and things like that from, you know, reputable sources, but it is still even getting harder for some of those reputable places to know what is true as well, because as the technology advances, you know, we can make someone say something who didn't say it and all those sorts of things. So I guess it's like, for me, I mean, I don't want to become a complete cynic, and I don't want our kids to become complete cynics, but I always say it's good to just have a healthy dose of skepticism. So just when you read something, just have in the back of your mind, how do I know this is true? Do I need to do some more investigation before I run with this, before I go and share it, before I take it on board as gospel, you know? So it's just having those little questions in the back of your head. So, and again, this can happen if you're, I know you're probably not going to be researching many holidays at the moment, but if we were looking at where we wanted to go camping or where we wanted to visit, you know, next at Christmas time, and we're researching that as a family, maybe we Google something, and when stuff comes up, you know, have that conversation. So do you think that person is writing a review, or have they actually been there? Or is this something that, you know, that really nasty review that they wrote, wonder what else happened? Or, you know, it's just trying to not take everything on board as you know, completely the truth, when we just might need to just, I guess, have that little bit of healthy skepticism to just keep questioning, you know, and that means we're questioning everything that goes on online as well, you know, with our conversations. You know, you know, sometimes we can get angry because somebody responded in a way that, you know, we thought was rude or whatever, and it's like, you know, maybe we have to think a little bit more critically about that. Maybe they were just in a hurry walking out the door. Maybe they misinterpreted me. You know, all these sorts of things that happen online that can cause us, you know, angst or frustration or sadness or all those sorts of things. So we have to sort of, just get really critical with everything that we consume, you know, everything that we say, everything that we share, and even everything that we follow, and really looking at, you know, I have this other term of, you know, mindfully scrolling, because we get through that, the opposite of that, which is just the mindless scroll, where we just, you know, our finger just goes and we're just looking, and all of a sudden half an hour has gone by. We haven't really taken in anything of real value to ourselves. Hasn't really added anything to our day. We might have found out a few things that our friends are doing, and, you know, but I think it's really, even that is just looking at how are you actually spending your time, and get critical with that, because, you know, our time's pretty precious. And so again, something that adults are not great at either. But I think something that we also want to be spending some time doing as well is looking at, you know, when am I spending that time doing that mindless scroll, as opposed to when do I need to do something that, you know, I need to get a bit more productive with my time now.
Yeah. I mean, there's two things that come up to mind when you were just speaking then. One is about the fact that communication online can often have an loss of tone, so the communication, it can be lost in translation, and so it's about having the verbal conversations with your kids about the online communication. So it's like verbal communication is still needed in order to to have more compassion or understanding or greater discernment for online communication. So I think that's a really good point. And also what came to mind is a lot of the things that I see my kids sometimes mindlessly doing without really thinking about is getting involved in sharing things like challenges or sort of like that chain mail, or things like share, when they get told online, share this, and I'll give you a like, or I'll put you on my page, different stuff like that. And also sharing certain memes which aren't necessarily they might find funny, but it could be offensive to somebody else, like not having that level of discernment at that age, but yet they are doing that a lot.
Yeah. And that's a tricky thing too, because as you say, they don't always have that level of discernment. They don't always have that brain capacity to that cognitive development to know whether this is offensive or not. And so again, it's just trying to, when those things come up, and hopefully there's things that are going to be little things that happen or that they share. Again, it's just having that conversation. If you see them share something you don't think is completely appropriate, to say, oh, there might be people that are offended by that, just like you would teach them if they said the wrong thing to somebody in the street. You say, that might be offensive to some people. Did you think that someone might, be this way and that might affect them this way? And so it's just all about teaching about respecting ourselves and respecting others. But also, looking at I know similarly we have conversations online and we get involved in conversations that we probably shouldn't either, or that don't serve us well, or arguments we're not going to win. And these are, again, really big skills that I think, again, adults not great at, but it's something I teach in schools as well. And we actually do role plays of conversations that I've seen online where everything just goes badly. And we want to look at what point do you recognize that this isn't a conversation you need to be involved in. So we actually get kids to look at somebody saying a nasty comment, somebody responds in an equally nasty way, it goes back and forward and it gets really nasty, and both people end up looking really bad. So we talk about how that affects our digital footprint, but also how it affects us emotionally as well, and all of that time and emotional energy we wasted in wondering what they were going to say, then they come back and then they wait a few hours, and how am I going to say something back? And that's really taxing on a child, and can take away from a lot of other emotions that they need to be feeling right now. So we do look at, somebody says a nasty comment, what are your options? Do you get involved in this, or do you ignore, or just say not today, mate, or what are your options? So it's actually looking at and giving kids the real life examples where things go wrong, so that they can, I guess, try and preempt what's going to happen. And sometimes it's okay to have an argument online. It's okay to have a difference of an opinion. But the minute that becomes personal or judgmental or aggressive, that's when we pull out, because it's not an argument we're going to win. It's very rare that we change someone's mind online. And particularly if we're doing it with people we don't really know that well, because we don't know where they've come from, what their background is, what their situation is. So I think even just learning about conversations to be involved in and conversations that they need to abort is a real skill as well. And again, that can happen just by looking at some of their conversations that they might have, or even conversations you've seen on your own feeds, and say, wow, at what point do you think this person should have pulled out of this? So that can certainly be a skill.
And I think that that's a really good point about showing them on your own feed, because I think that it's for younger kids, but as the kids get into their teens, they really don't want you looking on their stuff. And, there's battles that go on, but I'm your parent and I have the right to do that. No, you don't. Yes, and so there ends up being this bit of battle between privacy and not. And then if you do sort of are on their feeds and you call them up about, do you think that was a good, what do you think about sharing that? Did you think it was a good idea, or do you think that comment was really good? After a bit, they go, do you know what? Like, they'll answer you at that time, and then they go, I don't want to be questioned about this, so I'm just going to start another account that my parents don't know about, because I don't want them on this account, because I don't want them pulling me up on stuff. And so I think that there's this difficult line with a lot of it in even as they get older and through their teenage years in being able to have these conversations, because, you know, you've got to tread lightly because you want to be involved, but you don't want them to feel like you're too involved. You don't want them
and it's definitely a fine line, and that's why I always say these teachings have to happen pretty young, as soon as they're getting online, as soon as they're starting on their social media and things. You know, we want to have those conversations, particularly if your child is doing it under the age of 13, which is the go-to age of most of the apps. If you're allowing your child to go on those sorts of things before that time, then that's the proviso that you allow them, is that, well, if you're on there now, I need to be there helping you do this, because there's a reason why that age is there, and it's because you don't have a lot of the skills and the thinking necessary. So I need to help you, because yes, by the time they're 15 or 16, they're not going to be wanting you to be monitoring their conversations and all those sorts of things. And so we want to hope that a lot of those teachings have already happened. And look, a lot of this stuff just comes down to being a good respectful person anyway. And certainly there's some skills there, but hopefully by the time they get to be doing it, when you're not always there with them, that these are just some good just being, as I say, a good kid who respects other people and respects themselves. So we hope that all of that teaching that we do every day in our normal parenting rubs off on the things that they do online as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just everything that we've shared, there's such great suggestions that you've given that we can do with talking about our kids in so many ways of, in different things that they're doing. But it also highlights how much extra parenting jobs and duties there is to do now, as opposed to when we were young and our parents had to, teach us things. They didn't have this whole element of digital communication. And so it really feels quite overwhelming for parents to have to stay and because they want to stay on top of all these things. So it's like this whole other element of parenting at a time when parents are probably working more than they did, in the generation prior to us. So it sometimes can feel really overwhelming for parents.
Yeah, look, it can. And I guess that I want parents, for example, when I have a parent evening or something at a school or community event, and parents come along, and I guess they always come along with this feeling that they're going to walk away so afraid. There's so much to think of. There's so many predators out there, and I'm going to learn about grooming and cyberbullying and all. And absolutely, that stuff is all there. But I guess what I want parents to take away is that, if you rely on just your good basic parenting principles, which is stick to your values that are important to you, stick to communicating well with your kids, learn what you can and be involved in your child's life. You don't have to know every single app that's out there. You don't have to know how everything works, but take an interest when you can, and just keep building on those those good values of being a good person, and all of the other stuff, it will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this paragraph that you put, and I think it's probably even a really good one to end on, that I read from your book, and that's that you said that whatever the circumstances, whatever the technology, we need to remember to focus on the connection we have with our kids and how we must gain understanding and perspective and what it means to grow up in these times. This is what will ultimately determine the effect the digital world has on them and the boundaries and strategies we use. So I loved that. The idea of really just focusing on connection, because I mean, as you know, that a lot of my work is I really believe connection is medicine. That's my mantra, and to me, that is the key to successful relationships, successful work, success. Full stop, is how we connect to ourselves, to others, to the world around us. So, yeah, I loved that paragraph, and I think that it really helps simplify it all, that when you do get overwhelmed, just think about the connection piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't gone over? I know that's such a massive, massive topic, the digital world, and you've obviously got the whole book on it for that purpose, which is an incredible book, which gives a lot of information and shares some of those little role play things that you talked about before. And within the book, I saw that there is quite a few of those that you've highlighted, which is, really does help understand the way that the child's mind is working when you describe some of their responses. So, they're really good things to have. But apart from that, is there anything that you think that we haven't covered that would be really beneficial, that would help people at this particular time of working, living and studying at home?
Look, not really. I guess, the other part that I have in the book is at the end of each chapter, I have, I guess, statements or questions for parents to ponder themselves. So it's just, I guess, little reflection pieces on whatever it is I've written about. And in a lot of ways, it might challenge some parents to some of their original beliefs that they might have held about something, or what they thought they knew. And so I guess even at this time, I think it's just a good time for us to just reflect on what it means for our kids now growing up. What would we have been like when we were this age? Because I think when we do that, it helps. I think it just helps us with some perspective. If these devices were handed to us as 8 or 9 or 10-year-olds, how would we have been? Probably exactly the same as our kids. So, we only have what we have, and we only know what we know. So I think it can be a really good thing just to try and put ourselves in our kids' shoes every now and then, and just that way we can at least come at things from an angle that shows that we have some understanding of what they might be going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. And I love talking to you because it is takes away that fear element. And I think that there's a lot online, and this is why I kind of wanted to do this interview and really focus on more of the positives around digital, and obviously looking at the challenges, but really focus on, some of those benefits of using digital technology and how to navigate that space, because there is a lot of benefits, and it can really have connection to it, and it can have information and learning, creativity, and all of those things that we talked about. And you give such a grounded perspective on it all. And to have 5 boys, and I don't know how you do that, but to have 5 boys that are really well adjusted to all those things and still have the balance of life and have the approach that you have, and it's so worthwhile. And I really appreciate you coming and sharing all that knowledge with us today. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Love chatting with you as always, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks so much. So for anyone who's listening, what is your biggest insight or takeaway from today's conversation? Leave a comment and let us know. And if you would like more information on Martine, her website, or how to purchase her book, which I highly recommend, that if you do have kids, or if you are a parent, if you're a parent or child educator, that you really get a hands on this book, which is just newly released and launched. How can they do that?
Well, they can head to my website, which is themodernparent.net. They can also purchase it from Amazon, and it's available as paperback or as Kindle, or you can get it as a PDF from my website as well. So you can purchase that there, and then if you follow me on Facebook, that's where I sort of, I guess, add more of those the more daily things about the technology that changes, and the apps and the games and all of those sorts of hints as well. So you can follow me there as well.
Awesome. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends, and consider subscribing to the Wealthy Living podcast on iTunes and YouTube. To find out more about my services, you can visit my website at wealthyliving.com.au, or connect with me on any of my social media channels. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.